good afternoon.
Hello.
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 Good afternoon. Welcome to Berlinale Talents 2025. We feel strange standing in front of you
Yeah,
guys.
it's a bit weird, actually. No,
But we're really honored to have the TEDdy Talks here in our house. And we're honored to have the TEDdy Academy and the Queer Academy here. Thank you so much for coming. And we heard it's an amazing format, so very much looking forward to experiencing that.
And welcome, Djamila. Do your magic. Hang on.
No pressure.
Everyone, please enjoy.
Thanks. Is my microphone on? Do you hear me? Yes. Thank you so much to Vincent Nicola for the re-invitation to moderate this TEDdy Talents talk that we've come up with 3 years ago together with Bart. And it's been a wonderful format, and I'm just very happy to build upon it in this edition. And building on the topic of listening courageously, we came up with, Bart actually came up in a moment of enlightenment, listening to music, with the topic of listening to your heart. So we were thinking about how listening or listening in is an inherent part of queer storytelling, and listening can also be a side of resistance, a side of subversive strategy, and a form of disobedience. So we now have 4 wonderful guests sharing from their particular queer filmmaking practice, programming practice, and larger practice in the industry, because many of you do several things and not only one thing. And we'll delve into the discussion what listening or listening in might mean within our respective contexts, but also in coming together maybe in a format as this festival is. And before I even talk more, I just want to introduce our wonderful guests to you. To my very right, Paulina, Lorenz, thanks for being here. You can clap. Jun Lee. Jun has a film in Panorama, which is called Queer Panorama, and it's wonderful, and you should see it. Faridah Gbadamosi. Thanks so much for being here. And Connor Jessup. Connor's film is actually premiering tomorrow, right? Yeah.
Tomorrow.
You should also go watch it. We will have time to discuss and speak to each other and speak amongst us in a minute. But you all prepared inputs, and I would maybe like to start with the first one and invite you, Paulina, to share with us. But I would also like you to know Paulina a little bit better than just by her name, and tell you that Paulina is a Berlin-based writer and producer, as well as co-founder of Jünglinge Film. The young artist-led production company develops and focuses in their production on feature films and series with a queer feminist post-migrant perspective, such as the wonderful feature Foto 3, No Hard Feelings from 2020, the RD series Schwarze Früchte, Black Fruit that you can still watch online, also a big recommendation there. Paulina also works as a screenwriter for formats such as Druck, Scam, Germany, which was happening in 2021 with Funk, Krank Berlin, most recently at Apple TV, ZDF, and Euphoria Germany, which will happen next year on RTL, so stay tuned for that. And Paulina, I invite you for your input.
Yes. So I was quite inspired when I heard this year's title of the Talents program, the Listening Courageously. And when I got this invitation to speak about this topic in the framework of the TEDdy program, I was even more excited because to me this idea of listening courageously doesn't only resonate with my kind of double role in my work. I'm both a producer and a writer, always working very closely with collaborators. But I would also argue that listening courageously speaks to what I would describe as a queer and a feminist practice of collaboration. and also of leadership, in a way of leading not by way of dominance or volume or assertiveness, but leading with empathy and sensitivity and courage and bravery. So I want to speak a little bit about this, listening courageously as a practice of leadership and also as a political practice of solidarity. So in my everyday work as a producer and writer, I try to challenge myself to create and lead with empathy and bravery, which to me means really listening to what the creatives that I work with want to do, what kind of stories they want to tell, so that they don't have to keep explaining themselves, and then standing up for their vision and defending their way of seeing the world with courage and bravery. And I think that listening courageously, especially when you work in teams, also means staying open to being challenged, because I think listening, it's always connection and it's always an openness. Listening with bravery to me means opening yourself up to dissent, disagreement, maybe even pain or hurt, always while staying in connection with each other. And to me, one of the biggest gifts of my work and my practice is having people around me who really understand me and support me and challenge me without leaving your side when there's maybe disagreement. And I can really say that I wish that you have these people around you too. And if it doesn't feel like that with the people around you, then maybe you need to find other people around you. And I think that also on, not just on the production level, but also creatively, because as I said, I also work as a writer, I think listening courageously is a practice of creation with love and with empathy, and a process of creation where you look inward and you look inward with bravery. What that means to me, listening to my heart as a filmmaker, means producing what moves me and writing about what moves me, and sticking to your own compass, to your own truth, and listening to yourself instead of maybe trying to cater to an outside expectation first, instead of, which I think something that happens a lot, especially with where the industry is at least in Germany right now, kind of trying to preemptively constrain yourself to make your vision less radical, less sharp, less transgressive. And I think that to me, the work that's the most visionary and the people around me that I find the most visionary are those that stay as close to themselves as possible, that listen to themselves as much as possible, to how they see the world, to what moves them. And I think that does take a lot of courage and bravery. And I think another point about listening to your heart in this industry also means not letting yourself be distracted, distracted by maybe voices around you telling you to make your stories, especially when you tell stories from a marginalized perspective, to make them more accessible, to make them more universal, to make them more relatable, always to some presumed audience of people who have actually proven time and time again that they just don't want to understand, they don't want to relate. So I don't think it makes sense to keep trying to do this. And I also think it means not letting yourself be distracted by the shifting of discourses to the right, what's happening right now again, which feels, I'm sure to a lot of you as well, like this endless time travel loop that we're stuck in, that is meant to keep us in place, especially as marginalized creators, this amnesia that keeps telling us that we are the first in our communities to do something radical and visionary, which we never are, because there's always so many people who have come before us, who fought for the same things, who have created really radically before us. So I think that listening courageously, especially as a queer creator, also means not forgetting these films and these fights that came before you. And it also means not letting yourself be distracted by some performative diversity and inclusion discourses, but also not letting yourself be distracted by capitalist and individualistic narratives of advancement and success, where there can always only be these few exceptional ones who make it to the top, of course based on merit, not on structure, power, and privilege. So as you can tell, it's getting a little bit political, and I think filmmaking is inherently political, and it should be. And as I said earlier, I think listening courageously is the basis for a political practice of solidarity, because it's a practice of staying with yourself while also being close to others. And I feel that it also means staying hopeful and faithful to this possibility of connection and understanding, despite all the things in our face that tell us that it's not possible, and staying hopeful that cinema can play a big role in this, in creating this connection, this empathy, and this solidarity that I think we need right now. Yeah, I would go as far as saying that listening is the foundation, the fundament for solidarity, and I think that courage is what is needed to enact solidarity. So in these times of oppression, of violence, of the withholding of passports, for example, for trans people in the US, of the cutback on programs aimed to further equality and justice, in times of fantasies and also realities of occupation, of displacement and deportation, that we really need to be there for each other, not just as filmmakers and collaborators, but as humans. And I think we need to listen and to fight for each other. So I think I'm probably not alone as a filmmaker, kind of finding myself in doubt in these times, thinking about what can images and stories really do? Like, shouldn't we rather be in the streets? And like, yes, we should be in the streets, you should be in the streets. I think we should be doing both. But to me, what brings me hope is that I think these desperate times that we're in always also offer this potential for a disruption and for a transformation. Like, for example, we have elections coming up next week in Germany, and the left party has the highest rate of new members in 15 years, which is crazy and great. And I think that listening into queer history and queer resistance, queer filmmaking, can really affirm you in this potential for change and for resistance always. I was feeling really defeated and desperate some weeks ago, and then I went to the Nan Goldin exhibition that you should all check out if you haven't already. And just experiencing this resistance and the hope inherent in these photographs and in this preservation and depiction of queer lives really reminded me of this healing and transformative power of art and films. So yeah, I think you can tell that I'm giving also kind of maybe a pep talk to myself to stick with it. So speaking to myself and to you, let this desperate moment in time radicalize you as a filmmaker, as a leader, as a human, to fight harder for your vision, for justice, for solidarity, for truth, to listen harder, to listen with more courage, to resist harder, to build community harder, to be more determined and more fearless and more sensitive in the stories that you tell and the images you produce, because we really do need them to fight and to connect and to heal. So listen to your heart. And to those around you, listen with courage, stand up for your stories, stand up for your collaborators, and for all your fellow humans with empathy and with courage. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Paulina. Also for reminding us to listen into not only resistance, but into the continuities and into those and the realms that have been before us. There's a lot of things that we can pick up on in a moment, but I would like to continue as we've now been thinking about how to work together, how to lead, and that is something that applies in production, but definitely also in direction. And I will immediately pass the word on to Jun Lee, who is a filmmaker based in New York and Hong Kong. Started his career as the lead actor in Simon Chung's I Miss You When I See You. His directorial feature includes Tracy and Drifting, playing at the International Film Festival in Rotterdam and in Tokyo. And he co-produced Fly Me to the Moon 2023 with Stanley Kwan, and his latest film, as we've heard, is Queer Panorama, that was premiering a few days back here in the festival, and that you should all see. Thanks for being here, Jun.
Thank you for having me. I'm so happy to be here. I would just talk a little more about my background because I never go to a film school. I study journalism in Hong Kong and then gender studies in the UK, and I started working as a journalist before I did filmmaking. and I did daily news in the beginning, and then feature, and then so a huge part of my work was to interview people, to listen to people, and when I listen to them, I get them to talk more by asking the question they want to answer or the question they don't want to answer. And then this project came to me, Tracy. And it's also I Miss You When I See You When I was an actor, to Simon Jung's film. But then I was very young when I started. I was 25 years old. So I did not know what it was to be a filmmaker. I did not know what... I consider myself first and foremost a writer and an editor. I don't know what is directing. But then you would have to be a director to protect your writing. And then if you then you realize after several years of filmmaking, you would have to be a producer to protect your directing. And well, maybe it could be a little less complicated because after some years and I stepped back from being a director. I help produce my friends' projects or write for other directors, and it feels so much more liberating to view the whole craft in another point of view. So the first two feature that I made was it started from an idea that I already had when I was in college. That was a story that I reported on, and I adapt them to films. So both of them were social events, were a piece of news, and I elaborate them into a feature film. And then I turned 30, and then I wanted to make something that is more personal. So I really like the title today. So when you guys sent me the email, it's like, listen courageously. I thought it was about listening to others first, but then in the content, it's like, listen to yourself courageously. Because that was what I did when I decided to make my third film, to make it a very personal one. And the development was really, really hard, and a lot of people told me that it was too niche. It was something that they are not comfortable to push it to the market. It's too hard because it's a film from Hong Kong, but it's in English, and it's without a Hong Kong movie star, but also it does not really appeal to the overseas audience because it's about Hong Kong. So you're caught in the dilemma of this situation where it is not, everybody tells you that it is not compatible with the market. But I really want to do it. I really want to tell a story about my partner and I. It's just a little story. It involves so few people. It involves so little resources. So at the end, I financed my own film, and that's why in the beginning I told you have to be a director to protect your writing, and you have to be a producer to protect your directing work. And now that I own a film as a property, I see it from a different point of view again, because I never thought about a film. I never view my film, my work as a product, but now I have to, because it's the nature of the relationship between me and my film now. So I gain perspective. I never talk to sales. I never talk to distributors. Now I have to, because I have to be part of the decision making. So I have to inform myself, educate myself in order to do that. And that is not necessarily what I want to do, because I would like to have the pure relationship with my film. But now, once you become once you know this part of filmmaking, this part of industry, you cannot go back. So it's like you have, and I always now have the knowledge of this part of the industry when I start writing, and it is a bad thing. But then you can always consciously work against that, and find the joy knowing that, and you choose to work on something that you like, and you choose to focus on the things that you like about filmmaking. I watched I watched a film this morning. I really liked it. I really want to share it with you all. I watched Dreams and Nightmare this morning before I came here, and it's like my day started really, really well. It was such a great film. I recommend everyone to watch, because my premiere was like 2 days ago, and I was so busy going to the press, and then preparing for my premiere, and then have the gathering with my actors, because they come from all different parts of the world, and it is the first time all of them gather together to know each other, because it's like the film has different portions. So only the main character meet all of them, and they don't know each other, but we spend time together. And this morning was the first film I watched in this festival, and it was so satisfying. It's like I have this feeling of why I wanted to come into this industry in the first place, because watching a film like this makes me want to make more films. So that's my sharing.
Thank you very much, too. Thank you for also picking up a few things that, Paulina, you already brought into the space when you say it's important to listen what is close to you and to introspect and take it from there, and also then develop your practice from those very moments of listening, and then you ending on sharing a recommendation for a truly wonderful film, and I can only second there. Go watch it. Dreams and Nightmares is also a form of listening to each other, which is something we kind of need more of within the industry. That is obviously very competitive, very commodified, but there's spaces in between that we need to stretch there. So thank you so much. Faridah Gbadamosi, sorry, I keep on stumbling.
The G is silent.
Gbadamosi.
There we go.
Faridah Gbadamosi, it's a pleasure having you. Thank you so much for taking the time. Faridah is a pop culture lover dedicated to making film more inclusive. She has extensive experience as a film programmer, working with Frameline, the California Film Institute, Athena Film Festival, SIFF, and more. And beyond curation, she has consulted on film and TV projects, published media articles, taught film courses, and served as the director of distribution for the Peabody-winning Mr. Soul. She chairs the board of the Anarchist United Foundation, founded by Lily Bukowski, and is on the community board for the Gathering Spot. And currently, she's a senior programmer at the Tribeca Enterprises.
Hello, everyone. My name is Rita. I just want to say thank you all for coming out. You could be watching movies. Instead, you're listening to us talk, so I'm very excited to have you all here. I'm a little different than my fellow panelists in that I am a gatekeeper, and I have no problem articulating that programming in many ways is gatekeeping. This industry has lots of doors to walk through, and I happen to be standing at one. I know a lot of programmers don't necessarily see their job that way. They see it as a way to create access. But if you're in a position where you create access, that means you're in a position where you could deny it. So ignore the other side of it is to ignore your responsibility within the role. So it is a privilege and a responsibility to be a programmer. So I'm very thankful that I had that responsibility. As was mentioned, I am currently at Tribeca. I'm a senior programmer there. But prior to that, I was artistic director of a queer film festival called Outfest. And I was at Frameline, and I've been in over 40 film festivals. So I understand that space quite well. In addition to that, I do some film consulting, mostly documentary films, and I do kind of strategy sessions. And one of the things that I find when talking about film is really having conversations about, like, right now, we're in this space of how. How does the film get made? That is the conversation that's been happening quite a bit. And thankfully, that's a good question, because before it used to be just who and what. We'd watch these movies, and it sometimes would feel like checkboxes. Like, oh, it's queer, we've got our queer film for the festival. Thankfully, we're now looking at these films and how are they made? Are there people behind the scenes from the same community? Are they actually, I think my earring's making noise, I apologize, I'm gonna take it off. How are these films getting made? Who's doing the making? Who's in the background? And why are they making that movie? I think these are the conversations that we have in programming now that is very exciting. But for me, the question that's been like really exciting for me is like, what is queer storytelling? I'm so thankful we're in this period where we're actually questioning the who's making the film and who they're making it for, and we're no longer getting films that are well-meaning stories about how hard it is to be queer and how we might get murdered. And these are still very valid stories, but that is not the only queer experience. But the thing that I'm really interested in is, how do we define queer storytelling now? Is it just by who makes it? Is it just by who's in the story? I had this wonderful conversation with a filmmaker a few years back whose film did not explicitly have any queer characters, but as a queer woman and as a person who was talking about the way they make their film, they felt their film was intrinsically queer, specifically in how they actually built the film set. She was talking about how when she was making the movie, she was trying to figure out why she felt so uncomfortable with the process of making the film, in how she was casting it and how she was doing it. And then the point she came across was, I'm inherently recreating a production model that was not built with me in it. This was a queer woman of color from the Dominican Republic, and she realized that even the nature of how we do films, how we deal with the hierarchy of film is anti-queer. Because it doesn't allow people to speak up. It gives you a number, a name, it's not inclusive. So the idea of what is queer storytelling for me is also the conversation of like, how do we now define queer film? The 90s, one of my favorite movies is Watermelon Woman. And it is consistently lauded as this amazing representation film, a film in which we finally see queer sex on screen in a way we hadn't seen before. But what I always found fascinating is it's a unique way to tell a pseudo-biographical story. It actually changed the way we talk about documentary film. We now have tons of hybrids, but Cheryl was doing it in the 90s. But that's never the context of how we see queer film. When you talk about Tongues Untied, you talk about the doors that were opened by the film, but not the style of filmmaking that was done. So I think one of the things that I find really interesting as a programmer is seeing how, in many ways, well-meaning ways, we also put a box on what queer storytelling is, when it could also be the nature of how we make the film. Like, how we tell the story, the shape of the story, not just the who. How and why are like very important to me as a programmer, because it's the nature of my business, but it's also, I feel like, maybe something the filmmaker should also take on now. The how and the why we make our films, I think is something that I'm really interested in like pushing forward as we go into this new era where the definition of queer storytelling needs to evolve. And then on the other flip end, I'm in the United States and I'm a programmer, and we're in this space where trans rights are being vastly eroded, which means, and all types of queer rights are inherently being eroded. So my job is also as an advocate. My job is to create space and conversation where queer people are built into the fabric of the conversation, not invited in. I remember someone was describing this idea that when you are building a truly inclusive space, it is not that you build the space and you welcome people in. It is that in the construction of the space, those people are built into what it is. And I think that, as we are navigating this new administration and this new industry, is a thing that I'm hoping gets thought about more. That as we are building new structures, or we're talking about new distribution models, we're talking about new ways to get our film funded, that we are taking into the account that queer people are not thought of at the end of the process, but at the very beginning. That they're in the room, at the table, as you are creating those stories and you're creating those films. And that's kind of the things that I like those would tend to be my the thing I say that are provocative. Provocation, I can't even say the word. My word's not working. But those are the things that I kind of think about consistently. And when I heard the title of this, Listen Courageously, one of the things that I think it's truly courageous to do is to listen different. I think often we are so sure that we are right, that when we are listening, we're listening to respond. We're listening for a way to insert ourselves in many ways, but we're not really listening with the intentionality of growing or changing ourselves, even when we are the marginalized ones. So like we need to recognize that sometimes the listening to yourself also listens to the way you are engaging differently. Maybe there's a different way of doing it, and recognizing that we are building a future that has never existed before. As we're creating better industry, as we're making new films, as we're existing in spaces, we can look to the past to see what has worked and what hasn't worked, but we are imagining something different. And the beautiful thing is we're in an arts filmmaking community. We imagine things on a regular basis. So the hope is that we can imagine something better, and instead of trying to hold on to or jump into the spaces that used to exist. I often joke with my friends, when I'm talking to people, it's just like, my job is to open doors to a room that may not actually be a room anyone actually wants to be in. We need to change some of the rooms that we're trying to go into. So many people are so excited to get a seat at the table. The table's corrupted. The table's rotting. It's not working for the people who are at the table. So we need to imagine something different. So I think one of the things that I have the pleasure of doing because of the nature of what I do is work with people to kind of imagine what else could be. It's very exciting to play in that kind of space, and we'll have more conversations, but that's kind of my 2 cents.
Thank you very much. There's so many things I want to say. I'll just stick to thanking you for reminding us to listen to discomfort and to the configuration of spaces and to difference, as well as the fabric, you said, and the structures and the forms that we're navigating, as in films, but also spatial constructions and forms. So we'll talk about that in a minute, but first we want to hear from Connor. Connor Jessup is a Canadian actor, writer, and director, and is best known for his leading roles in the series Lock and Key and American Crime, and for the independent feature film Close to the Monster. His short films have been screened in Toronto, in Clermont-Ferrand, in Palm Springs, and many other international festivals. In 2018, he directed a documentary portrait of the Palme d'Or-winning Thai filmmaker Archie Pong for the Criterion Collection, and is now present with his film premiering tomorrow in Generations. Connor, thanks so much for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah. Looking forward to hearing from you.
Yeah. I'm going to go to the podium so we have a nice round bookend. Thank you guys all so much for being here, and thank you. It's really inspiring to hear you talk. It's really inspiring to be here in a very queer room at a pretty queer film festival, and I apologize in advance for being a bit stuffy. I'm fighting a bad cold. I really had no idea what to talk about today. I said yes a few weeks ago and then panicked because I had no ideas. Actually, I panicked and then I said yes, and then I continued to panic. Really no ideas. It feels like I spend most of my life that way, just staring at a blank page with zero ideas. Some of you probably relate. The last couple of months I've been trying to figure out what my next project will be, and I'm filled with uncertainty about that too. I don't know what I want to say. I don't have any clarity. All I have is a vague feeling, maybe a shape. You know, I feel like I'm looking at myself through like a very thick veil. It's very frustrating. It's going great. There's a behind-the-scenes clip I really like of the great director Isao Takahata making his film The Tale of the Princess Kaguya, which maybe some of you know, Studio Ghibli movie. It's amazing. The movie's wildly over budget. They're months behind schedule. Everyone's miserable. Nothing's been easy. Takahata, who's famously slow and indecisive, is lying on a couch in the production office, looking just like death, like he hasn't slept in weeks. And someone comes up to him and asks very politely, "Mr. Takahata, what is your film about?" "What are you trying to say?" And he looks at them totally baffled, like he doesn't understand the question. And he says, "Is that something directors are supposed to know?" This resonates with me. So I thought maybe I would talk very briefly about that, about uncertainty, because it's something I've been thinking a lot about recently, and because I think it's very connected to the theme of listening, and because for me, uncertainty is at the heart of what it means to be an artist, but it's also at the heart of what it means to be queer and to have a queer worldview. I grew up believing that what was important was knowing, or at least appearing to know. He knows who he is. He knows what he likes. He knows what he wants. Confidence is having clarity. All the great artists I admired seemed to have that clarity. They seemed very strong and confident. An artist is someone who has strong answers. You know, do you want the red curtains or the blue curtains? I want the blue curtains. Do you want faster or slower? I want faster. I never want faster, actually. An artist knows themselves. They're supposed to know themselves. It's a pretty masculine image, I think. The great director is a man, probably a straight man, standing tall with a megaphone, clear in his vision. You know, everyone always talks about vision. It's about having vision. And meanwhile, here I am with hazy vision, half blind, totally unsure, reaching around in the dark, tripping over myself. It made me feel like a fraud and a failure. Still does, a lot of the time. So I've spent a lot of my life pretending to be a person like that artist that I had in my head, pretending to be someone who really knows who he is and what he wants, someone you guys might respect. So that feeling of fraud and performance, of trying so hard to fit into a certainty, is probably familiar to a lot of the queer people in the room. That feeling dominated my adolescence. Realizing I was gay, trying very, very hard to ignore being gay, performing confidence in my identity, when inside me everything was storm and mess and confusion. My queerness seemed to promise a world of uncertainty, a world of shifting, unsteady landscapes, a life of questions and no clear answers. I didn't know what to do with that. Everything I did in my personal life and my work, as I started to make films, all of it was dedicated to resisting confusion. It wasn't really effective, but I was straining. I was straining so hard. I was like, my whole life was coiled and tight. To keep the storm out, to find certainty and sense, I closed the doors and windows. I stayed inside myself, and I made the world small. But as I came out, and as I started to look at my queerness more directly, as I fell in love and out of love, and encountered more art, more queer artists, as I made more things, more friends, traveled, failed, all of that, all the whole mystifying, dizzying range of, possibilities, I started to get the feeling for how much I'd been suffocating myself, how dull and insufficient the tools that I developed were to deal with this queer world in any sort of honest way. There's an old slur for gay people that I actually really like. Inverts, as in inverted people, the wrong way round, inside out, upside down. I think one of the best things that queerness did for me is it inverted me. It gave me the gift of inversion. When things can't be right or sure, suddenly there's room for surprise, mystery, discovery, and fun. In an inverted world, certainty isn't worth much. Uncertainty is the only honest response. In an upside-down life, anything is possible. My ex used to say that he would be a terrible person if he wasn't gay, and I think he was only half joking, because I know what he meant. I'm very easily distracted, very lazy. My iPhone has poisoned my brain. I find it too easy to be numb to the world, to myself, to the other people's lives, to my own life. For me, queerness has to be a call to empathy. It insists that the world is big and strange and unmapped and worth paying attention to. It demands curiosity, that we look and listen better to each other and to ourselves. And there are many forces right now, obviously, trying to make our lives smaller and uglier. False certainties are everywhere. Dead, incurious zombie hearts are trying to eat up everything that's strange and subtle and sacred. And there's so much noise we can barely hear ourselves think. And queerness can be an antidote to that. Queerness as a way of, not just as sexuality and gender, but as a way of interacting with the world, a way of keeping this strange world alive. And that's what art is for, too, I think. I hope. That's what the art I love does, anyway. It works upside down. It turns things inside out. It meets certainty with questions. It makes us less sure, more free. Art should bring us deeper into mystery, not pull us out of it. So that's how I'm trying to think now when I see the blank page in front of me. That's really what I want my life to be, what I hope it can be. A tilted head and an open window and a big, strange world. I'm really grateful for queerness, for opening the window. And I'm grateful for art for giving me tools to engage with what's out there. I want to get better at listening to myself and listening to everyone around me, and to actually be excited when I don't understand what I hear. I want to try and embrace an uncertainty that means openness, patience, curiosity, possibility. I'm just beginning to make movies, really, but I dream of making films that really are queer, truly queer. And all the side effects that come with uncertainty, like when I was sitting down to write this, frustration and fear and doubt, anxiety and embarrassment, I think they're worth it. So, thank you.
Thanks so very much. I love how it all connects. We started with a call to empathy, and we are ending on a call to empathy, and I think it's something we can never stress enough. The uncertainty really resonates with me, and also operating from the not knowing, and that's also really what it means to listen into something that you maybe sketched out as something that is not yet. But if we listen to those very vague notions, I think even maybe prefigurations of something that could be, things take shape. And I really love how all of you kind of related to that in your inputs. So I was wondering, when we think of listening as a side of resistance, as we are really also talking about the political notions. We were talking about distraction and noise, and thank you really also for the noise, because I think there's a noise that is distracting us, but there's also the noise that has the potential of us being the noise and listening into the white noise and what is between the articulated, voiced in language articulations. So I wonder how this notion of resistance is relevant to you in your practice. Whoever feels like that resonates.
I can jump in first. This idea of listening as resistance. There's in many ways, just a very obvious example is the act of going to panels and conversations is a form of listening that I don't think we put as much value in as we should. One of the things that I do at Tribeca is organize our free talks and conversations. And it's a privilege to put them together, but it's also a privilege to sit in the room of those conversations. One of the things that I think is, thank you, Chip, the people who put together the panel. Everyone on this is absolutely amazing. But the act of who we put on in these conversations and whose voices we prioritize, and then you going to sit and listen to them, that's what gives them value. Putting them on the panel is one step of it, but being in the room to listen to them, to hear them, to engage with them, that is in many ways resistance. I remember once I put together a panel. One of the things that I like doing is putting together a panel and kind of getting people in the room who wouldn't have been there if I had said certain things. So one of the panels I put together at Tribeca was a producers panel, but I did it in collaboration with GLAAD, which is a queer organization in the United States. So every single one of the panelists was the queer, but the panel was on producing in general. So this idea that one of the things that I also find that's sometimes frustrating about how we listen is many people, there's people who came out to this room because it was a Berlinale Talents talk, and there were people who came out to this room because it's a TED talk. Inherently, the people who are going to come to this room to hear us speak are people who probably already agree with us. So you're listening where you know you're going to agree. One of the things I think sometimes challenging is to go into a room where you're not sure you're going to. And how do we get people to do that, to engage in that kind of way and listen? And I think that's the power of building these sort of conversations and building them. And it's the reason why I'm really glad the Talents is hosting this conversation, because it's probably bringing people into this room who probably wouldn't have come otherwise. And I think that's also seeing the ways in which the rooms you're choosing to listen in. Because often we listen to agree. So I think that's one of the things that we can do a little differently, of course. But that's also the resistance, the sitting here, getting ideas, being affirmed or being questioned in certain ways, being discomfort, the uncertainty. I think that's power. Because you take that with you when you leave. Those thoughts kind of move with you. I've gone, I feel like I keep referencing panels that I've gone to and heard people speak at. And it's because I sat there and I didn't listen with the intention of saying I was going to say something back, but I sat there and I got to listen. It's a joy to kind of be in conversation with people, I think, is the other thing that's really amazing. Like, even those, one of the things that I don't love about social media, I know I'm being recorded, so I'm not hating on social media, but I think so much of social media, it prioritizes and values the shouting out and not the responses back. I think you see the likes before you see the replies. Not that the replies are great on the internet, that's not my point, but it's the prioritization. I remember one particular exchange was this young woman put something up there that I thought was so mean about people she did not know. And then I responded and she's like, well, you know, I'm not being serious. But then someone else agreed with her and gave her a like and a retweet, and she's like, yeah, I'm super serious. And I think that's, listening is resistance, but listening accurately is also super important. Like, being able to not just listen for the things you want to hear. I feel like I'm repeating myself. But like, the idea is, when you go to these spaces, listen to everything a person says. Listening is an act of resistance, but not just listening for the parts that make you comfortable. For the parts that make you really uncomfortable, that's really where you should listen. Because that discomfort is also telling you something. Being able to figure out why that thing that person said made you uncomfortable is really important. Even if it's because the thing they said was problematic, but to be able to articulate what it is that makes you uncomfortable, I think, is super valid and valuable. There's a reason why spaces like this is really great, because we're probably going to disagree on things or agree on things, and those moments help you learn better what you feel inside. It's not the moments of agreement that are like really fantastic, it's the moments of uncertainty, it's the moments of discomfort, where you really get to learn about what truly makes you you, and you can't really learn that unless you're listening to someone else.
I really like what you said about having a panel where you have queer people, but they don't talk about queerness. And I think it's so beautiful that we're here talking about listening in our practice, and yet in like all the inputs, there are so many answers to this question you posed about what does queer filmmaking mean? Like, from the kind of like the DIY aspect of like, okay, I'm writing my own stories, I'm directing my own stories, I'm producing my own stories, I'm just doing these things because it's the only way. But then also this, like, I love how Connor's take was now just like a perfect answer to your question. With like this space of uncertainty and potential and disruption, because in queer life everything is unclear. And that's really nerve-wracking, but there's so much potential of what can come out of that. If you like, if you can't like travel how's the saying, like the old roads, you know what I mean? So I think that's such a beautiful thing to hear, like all the things that make filmmaking queer and our practice is queer without having to talk about identity and coming out in these things. So yeah, I like that a lot.
Yeah. I agree. It's beautiful, and what is also beautiful is that the queerness in form was brought up, and the question of do we have to listen in a linearity, and what you said about the watermelon woman really resonated, because there's so many things you can tune into when watching that film, and it's maybe also the question of. And that really also responds to the aspect of where do we place our attention. There's so many different midtones or unspoken things, or so many things to be said or to be heard in silences or in between. So I think I really have to think about the non-linearity, not only of storytelling, but also listening as a queer filmmaking, but also programming or curating our conversational practice, and that really resonates. Jun, you're nodding. Is there something that you want to chip in with?
Well, I'm just not nodding.
He's listening.
Yeah, because it occurs so natural to me, and I write script in a very quick manner, and people come up to me and ask, like, how do you write this quickly? I was like, I remember the conversation that I have with people, and then I realized the reason why I remember them is because I really, really listen, and without a judgment, and I just sort of steal the words into the script, and this is what we do all the time as screenwriters. So to be open and not have a box where you think what your film is as a director might be a queer way of making a film, because that is a disruption of what a director is. And in my film, I didn't realize I was doing it until people tell me that I was doing it. Because my film, I asked the real people to play themselves in my film, so they have a lot of agency in that part of their segment of the story. And when I write it down, it's mostly from the memories of our conversation that comes from us, come from them, and come from me. And when we're on set, there are a lot of things that was improvised based on that memories, and it is this collaborative way of writing and directing and put that into an image that I think is my queer way of making films.
Thanks so much. It also makes me think about amplification a lot. When you say you have conversations and you carry them further and you make them, and you collaborate on those conversations, and you have then the agency given back to a cast in your very particular way, but also resonates with what you were sharing in the beginning, Paulina, the ways of how do we actually produce, how do we actually work together, what kind of what does it mean to lead with solidarity or to produce a practice as a practice, and both produce a practice of solidarity but also produce as a practice of solidarity. And we've been talking a lot about different approaches within the industry, but I'm also wondering, when we think about audiences and interactions with those who are not part of the industry, and Connor, your film is a coming-of-age film, and you're addressing particularly also young audiences. What does it mean to put stuff out there to be listened to, and whom do we want to listen to it, and how do we want people to tune into our work? I think this is an aspect that comes in as a directing position, but also to us as curators and programmers. Yeah.
I find that a really hard question to answer, actually, because when you're making something, you can't, I think, really think about people watching or listening to it or receiving it, because you just imagine, maybe you think about your best friend or your mom or something, but the hypothetical people, they start to, usually, if they don't have real faces in your life, the opinions you give them or the expectations you have from them are pretty boring. You don't know them, you know? So it's not helpful, at least for me, to think about people watching it. It's also scary. And then when it actually does come time to watch it, I'm too scared, and I have no ability to read the room. So usually it actually happens quite a long time after the fact that I get any sense for what it meant to me for people to watch it. But I think that's okay. I think it's okay that we're having two separate interactions, you know, that what the audience is experiencing is different than what I am. I don't think it has to be the same. For example, I made a movie when I was 20, before I came out, that was the most obvious metaphor for queer invisibility. but I would never have described it that way at the time. No pitch package had it. It wasn't a thought in my head, but I was obviously feeling something at the moment. So like, if you'd asked me this question then, I wouldn't have been able to give an honest answer. But now it means something very different to me. So I think, again, I'm just trying to go slow and be surprised by people and take what they're willing to, once it's done, and people can have other relationships with it. And if they want to share that with me, that's interesting.
So you also offer to hear, you offer for people
Unless
to hear
you don't
what
like
they...
it.
Okay. So don't dislike Connor's film.
No. Well, I'm joking, but half. But no, I think sort of like what I was saying earlier is that for me, the process of making something from the beginning to shooting and editing and then releasing it is a process of trying to figure out what you're doing and what you mean. And hearing people engage with something is part of that process. It's part of helping me understand what I'm trying to say and what I'm doing. So it's super valuable.
It also connects with what you just said, right? To have the audience respond or people telling you what to do to make yourself understand maybe a pattern or what a past aspect of yourself. And filmmaking is never like an individual process, right? So there's also so many voices that come together in that very film and so many tonalities that one could decide for to give attention to or not. Yeah. I want to take the opportunity to open up to the audience. We have a flying microphone, if I'm not wrong, and there is a question in the middle of the room already.
Hello. So I wrote my question down. 1 second, I have to open my phone again. I'm a queer screenwriter, and when I listen to my heart, one of the projects that I'm working on fills me with so much fire and excitement. But then I look at the political landscape, and that scares me. That really, really scares me. And then I'm filled with so much fear and paralysis sometimes about this particular project. So my question would be, when you're creating a very queer project, have you ever dealt with any fierce backlash, opposition, censorship? Have you ever been scared to create a project? How did you deal with it, and how did you get through it, and how did you resist?
I am scared. I was scared when I write, but it felt right, and it wasn't until I have to show people the film that I realized that I'm truly scared. But you listen. It's about listening to your heart, and you're doing the right thing. And even though you're scared, I may not be the person that I envisioned that I could be, but still I would do it my way. And you don't know. You don't know it until it's out, and you would receive unexpected support from your peers, from your friends, from the strangers that when they watch what you did, when they watch what you write, you might change them a little bit and make them a little braver. And there was a text that I received very recently, telling me that when I think about the worth of being kind, when I doubt the worth of it, because it's sent in Chinese. So she said, when I doubt the value of being kind, I always think of you, and that I didn't think I was a brave person, and I talked very softly. But then that changed me too. That is a mutual exchange of courage, of
knowing you're doing the right thing for listening to your heart and not practice a sense of self-censorship in this time.
Thank you very much, Jun. Is there anyone who wants to elaborate on the question?
I would just add that, I mean, I am lucky and privileged to live in a place and to make films in a place that is very supportive, and to have supportive people in my life. But the few times when I've ever had public engagements with our community, where I've had trepidation or anxiety about it, or I wasn't sure how things would be received, I was always overwhelmed and surprised by how supportive and positive, and how much the reaction was, and how not to the work, but to the idea, to the fear, and how much solidarity there actually is in this room and beyond. So I agree. I think politics will change, but we probably need your movie.
There is a question in the first row, and then there is a question here. Maybe we start in the... Okay, cool. Then maybe we start with you, and then we move on to the front.
Yeah. I have a question regarding this queer invisibility aspect that you named. I think it is not so clever making queerness invisible. I just want to make a little example. When I was age 7 or 8, I wanted to play a male part in musical theater, and it was not allowed, and it was very bad for my identity development. So I was asking myself, what do you mean with queer invisibility, or making queerness invisible?
I think we agree. I think queer invisibility as a negative thing, as exactly what you're describing, which is the power that the culture has in a lot of ways to make queer people invisible, or for queer people to feel pressure to self-erase, especially when they're young. So what I was talking about was a film that I made where I used, again, a clumsy metaphor of ghosts, actually, to talk about exactly that idea, that a feeling that I had when I was younger, that even though I was out in the world and a fairly confident person, that I felt a big, meaningful core part of myself wasn't being seen by anybody.
Thank you. Maybe we move to the front and then we go back again. In the very first row.
I have a question for, or regarding what Faridah said in the very beginning in your opening moment, because you were talking about seeing yourself as a gatekeeper, and also that implied, I think, giving access but also denying access, and that's something that's just stayed with me through the whole thing. And maybe it's not a particular, I don't know, maybe I'm not, it's not about what you've all come up with now, but that's still stuck with me, and I'd really like to, maybe you've already talked about it, but what that role means to you, and maybe talk a bit more about the denial of access and how you, what you mean by that, or, yeah, because I think it's a very interesting point.
Oh, yeah, I mean, I say denial of access because it's provocative, but the reality is when you work at a film festival, you say no to things. Like, we get over 13,000 submissions at Tribeca, and we will program from those 13,000 films 110 features and about 70 to 100 shorts. So we will say no to things. And the way that it gets articulated is we say no because we don't have room, because we literally don't have room. But for many people, they see it as denial. But the reality is, and this is a thing that I'm always trying to communicate, is we have this super negative relationship with the word no. And it's not so much, and I tend to say words that are provocative because it gets people thinking, but like, we're saying no because there's no room in this particular space, not because we're saying no to you, the person. So the denial of access is not no to you, it's just access to one particular space at that one particular time because there's no space at that particular time. I think sometimes we see any denial as a denial of who we are, a denial of our actual work, a denial. So that's part of that listening differently and listening courageously. There literally wasn't room. Like sometimes when I say there's 13,000 films, they feel like it's a cop-out, but it's also the truth. So like when you hear no, often, I mean, everyone loves the story of hearing the person who got like 100 no's and puts up all those notes around you. I don't understand the value of surrounding yourself with that much negativity, so much negative feedback. You hear no, but it's just a moment in time, and we live lives that are so many moments of time. So in terms of my responsibility, I recognize that when I'm giving opportunities to people, I want to make sure that I'm creating opportunities around that. That when I'm saying yes to someone, it's not just a half-assed yes. Like if a film's going to get into a festival I'm working at, any of the festivals, I want to make sure that I'm giving them the best shot, that that opportunity is actually an opportunity. I want to talk to the filmmaker. I want to make sure that they're engaging with the space correctly. If they have any questions, you should reach out. That's my responsibility on my side, but it's also your responsibility on your side. When you get the yes, use the yes. Walk into that space because you were given yes. There's lots of creators who will go into a space and ignore the fact they got a yes and only look for other yeses. And I think that's also one of the things that I think my responsibility as a person who's in the position I am, who can see these things, is to communicate that. Is to make things not opaque. To say things like, you got into the festival out of 13,000 submissions for a reason, so when you're there, move like you're there because you were invited in. Don't walk in quietly with your shoulders back and hiding. You were invited into a space, walk in with your head held high and walk through the space. You belong. And if you get a no, it doesn't mean because you don't belong. It's because there just wasn't room at that particular time. Find another space that lets you walk through the door. And I think that's one of the things in terms of like the thing that my job is to make that clear. That the rooms that, again, the spaces that we're all moving into are our spaces with different spots, but there's so many spaces to walk into that you should inherently still continue to engage with. So the denial is more a conversation of how we navigate the word no. And that, yes, I'm in a space where I say no, but I also want to articulate consistently and continuously, no is not a forever term. No is an opportunity sometimes. No is a provocation. That was the word I was looking for earlier today. No is not the end. No is rarely the end. So when I talk about denials, I talk about that I recognize I'm part of someone's story, and I hope that I am a part that provokes them to continue to do more. And I think that's where that part comes in. That even my yeses and my nos are inherently provocations. And that's how I see my responsibility in the space.
We will move back to the mid, right?
So I have a question to everyone, but mostly probably towards Faridah. I think your opinion, or like you're saying about like how queer identity and the queer cinema is kind of like evolving and going from more than just like the classics like Watermelon Woman. I think that's like really interesting, and I fully agree on that, because now when I think about like, so there's like this iconic paper by Richard D. I forgot his last name. It talks about how modern like queerness was kind of like, you know, born through like capitalism in a way. And you have like the New York bars and like clubs, and somehow they influenced us and kind of help us create like modern queer identities, and then somehow also shape the way we create like queer cinema. And that's why maybe sometimes, you know, it's a bit like too much repetition. So I'm kind of like asking, you know, like in today's like, you know, relationship between capitalism and queerness, under this kind of like conditions, how would you kind of predict the new queer cinema to be? Because personally, I feel like maybe you don't always need to have like a hashtag queer character in your film. Like if you're like a queer person, inherently your perspectives are queer. And then under this kind of like circumstances, like the art you make, how do you kind of make sure that, you know, when in the society, in the market where over-packaging yourself, let's say hashtag pinkwashing, you know, you have to sell like a certain way to package yourself into a certain way. Like if you don't do that in a way, how do you actually, you know, make your art, make your queer art be heard? Maybe it's also like very important for you as a curator and programmer. So I'm sorry if the question is a bit like confusing.
No, to be honest, they probably have better answers to this than I do. But ultimately, I guess I'm assuming, I'm just going to paraphrase the question a little, is like, what does it mean to make queer art in this space in which so much of being queer is being commodified within the capitalistic system? I mean, like, most of the stuff I do is kind of like showcasing what people are already doing. So I can't tell you what queer art is going to be in the future, not because like I'm not participatory in the system, but because I don't think one person decides. I think we're in a room collectively deciding what queer art's going to be. I'm on a panel with people who are redefining what queer art is going to be. I loved your definition of queerness and therefore the art coming out of it being the nature of uncertainty. I loved it being the act of listening and communicating. I loved it as a concept of leadership. Like, I think that we're all collectively deciding now, and that's also how you fight the commodification. Instead of letting these external spaces that are inherently giving us money, and we like money, no one doesn't like money, but these external spaces define what queerness is what's making it hard to define it. Because we're consistently pitching queerness to people and saying, hey, this is queer, and they're like, oh no, we're gonna refine it for you, this is what queer is. You guys are communicating what it is. They don't get to define it for you, the people who are, I guess, pinkwashing. But so for me, it's more I'm responding to whatever's coming in. I'm responding to the art. One of the things that is both fantastic and also like overwhelming about programming is that I'm watching so many things on very similar topics over and over again, but seeing different perspectives on it. And it's fascinating to see it, and it's also like impossible to articulate. My favorite is always, I mean, it's like the very easy answer of, people are like, this is the worst movie of the year. And I'm like, oh my God, you have no idea. You'll never see the worst movie of the year. But like, so like one of the things that's hard for me is like, there's just so much, and the world just hasn't seen. And it's an impossible answer. I don't know what will be the language of it because it's still being written. And the one bit of advice is like keep writing it, because people will tell you what that box is, because we love a box. People love to jump into a box, love to create a box. But the concept of queerness is the breaking of boxes. It is the destroying of those boxes. It's the moving past those boxes, and creating despite. It's entertaining that we're in this period of time in which capitalism is like, this is what queerness is, where 20 years ago, they wouldn't even say the word queer. So they just want a new box to play around with, and you can break the box that they're giving you as well. Build your own products, build your own spaces, build your own systems, and then they'll adapt to us because they need our money. And that's the one absolutism of capitalism. Eventually, they will need your money. So figuring out how to break out of that, I guess, is the problem. But these are the individuals who are kind of doing the breaking themselves.
No, I mean, I think it's the like diversity of different ways of storytelling that make the queer storytelling. So I don't think there's an answer to what the queer way of storytelling will be. And yeah, I don't know. I had this like moment in time where I got really annoyed at all the like Heartstopper and Love, Simon and like all the very like mainstreamy queer films, because I was like, this is not queer. There's nothing queer about it if you have the same storylines, the same linearity, the same tropes, but you just have like queer people or like gay or lesbian people. But now I'm like, honestly, why shouldn't queer kids have Heartstoppers? It's great. I started watching it. It's really cute. Of course. But I think it's important that we don't feel like this is the end. Like this is where we need to go. The same way that like legalization of same-sex marriage is not the end goal of like queer liberation. So I think that's kind of the same thing, like, and we shouldn't let people tell us that we should be happy and satisfied if we have like queer side characters in Netflix shows or even like queer protagonists. Like that's not the end of it. And I know that the whole like packaging and how to, yeah, like obviously the financing part, that's part of it, but I think to like listening to your heart, I think if you distract yourself too much with what people might want to hear and how you can package it in a way, you will never find the people who are right for the stories you want to tell, and you will just get distracted and confused by trying to keep up with what the like capitalist commodification wants from queerness at this moment in time. So, yeah, but I know it's a tough, tension.
I hear a lot of watching for multiplicity or holding space for multiplicity, and when we think about the no, sorry, I really also see the potential, because you were saying as a gatekeeper, on the one hand you say a no, and it's a no only in a moment in time, but there's also the potential of a no as in creating spaces that are saying no to certain iterations of harm, saying no to certain ways of working together, no of certain iterations of fixedness or ideas of what something in a box could be, and I think that is really also a form of resistance there. There's another question.
I think we all know that we are living in a very kind of scary moment in the world. I feel that, well, queer spaces are disappearing. Politics, we don't need to talk about that because it's very obvious. There's a crisis within the gay male community with chemsex. There's a lot of people dying, and it's like there's loads of things happening that are really worrying. And to be honest, like I make films because I want to talk about those things, because I feel that it's like my most powerful way. But I'm afraid that I'm not going to get to even talk about those, because with the world as it's going in the next 4 years, I'm not sure if that possibility is going to end. So bringing this conversation of listening courageously a little bit more down to earth is what is that we, in a room full of queer people, of creative queer people, what can we do to make sure that we fight, and we not only fight telling stories, but we really fight, because we might be out of rights in no time. Sorry.
Yeah.
Very dramatic.
No. I remember 2 years ago I spoke with a American filmmaker, trans American filmmaker, and I was asking this question of like, oh, what do you think, like, what does queer storytelling mean? And he was like, we're getting our rights like taken away. What do you mean, what does queer storytelling mean? And I'm so happy that we are talking about what queer storytelling means, and that we're not letting these like very real scary things take away our hope and our right to thinking about the future and thinking about art. And like this, I think that's something that queer people have always done, is like that we have a right to futurity, we have a right to exist in the future, imagine a future. I think that's something very important. And yeah, I mean, in Germany, like we have the election next week. We don't know what's going to happen when the right-wing parties get more power to like the funding system, if we're going to be able to make the kind of art that we're making now. So we're trying to do as much as we can, as quickly as we can. I don't know if that's the answer to it, but I think like going a little bit back to DIY, like just making the things, not waiting for the big players to say yes, not waiting for like the A24s or like whatever studios or big businesses think that queerness is something that they can take, and but doing it yourself, out of the community, out of collectivity, out of I think these are things like some friends of mine were just shooting a web series. Like, I'm not saying we should, of course we also shouldn't exploit ourselves, we need to get money and all these kind of things, but taking the means of production, the means of creation back into our own hands a little bit more, while also filling up the positions of decision making in production. That's where I'm at, but I'm really interested to hear what you're all thinking. So, good question.
And me, okay. I mean, it depends where you are in the world. It depends what city you're living in and what country you're living in and what community you're, I don't think there's a uniform answer. I mean, I think there's the wing of the answer, which is the question, what would the answer be even if we weren't artists, which I think is valid because queer rights and queer freedoms are under attack, infinitely beyond the arts, of course. But I think the moment that as artists you get you become purely reactive to the oppression, then the oppression wins too in a way. I think we need more shows like Heartstopper. I think I think you just need to keep making things, and sometimes it's not going to work, and sometimes people won't see it, and sometimes you'll fail, and sometimes you'll be stopped. But I don't know what the other option is. I mean, queer artists have been making queer art for thousands of years. It's as shit as it is now, it's a better time now than it has been probably ever across the board, And I think that's also a victory, and that's the result of everyone's fight and everyone's art. So I think we just have to not let them win in the end.
Awesome. My only point is I think we also need to be open to the reality that it's not just your work that needs to go out there. I think one of the things that sometimes comes out whenever these conversations happen is, okay, so how do I get my thing made? And if everyone in the community is only thinking, how do I get my thing made, nothing will get made. So one of the things that I really do hope comes out of this time is, a thing that is borrowed from the mutual aid stuff that happens inherently in political movements is for filmmaking to be seen in the same way, that we are all in a community together. So if we want to get something made, help someone get their thing made. And I think that's the one thing we can do in this period of time, because right now we live in this world that suggests that we are all siloed in the space we are doing, and often the way we define community, for better or worse, for many people, is what they can get out of the space, not what they're actually pouring into it. And the thing they can't take away from you is your labor. So if you are pouring into a space and you're also helping support people, if you're holding rigs, if you're, sometimes it's just little stuff. Maybe it's I still borrowed a camera from the university I'm working at, or I know a person who has a sound thing. I think that's the work, because even the act of even making the film then inherently becomes an act of resistance. It's not just the product itself, but again, going back to how it's being made and who it's being made with, is the resistance. And I think that's a thing that we can also do collaboratively regardless, because we can help each other. And I think that's one of the things that we can do as a form of resistance, that we borrow from the spaces in which, and that's a movement that exists across the board, the idea of us working together, creating space together, creating screenings of the films together, because in theory, you worry about the possibility that there won't be space in certain communities to even show the films. We make the spaces, really borrowing from the communities that came before us that did this work. Because again, it has been worse before, and they did things. It's not like there aren't tools that have existed beforehand. So I worry sometimes we get very caught up in this idea of, ooh, the things that I'm used to no longer exist. Then we make new things. We create new things, we move new ways. And I think that's the answer. It's not the sitting in, let's all be sad and frustrated, of course. Every day, something new. But also recognizing that we are also a resource. It's not that we are looking for resources, we should also learn to become a resource. And I think that's the way we kind of make things better.
I couldn't imagine a better point to stop the conversation. I think it was an extremely relevant call to act in solidarity, in translocal solidarity, using the infrastructures, shape-shifting through the infrastructures in our works, in our bodies, in how we organize and how we navigate the multiplicities together. Thank you so much for taking the time, for sharing, for your work, for being here. Thanks for listening and being with us. Enjoy the rest of Berlinale and have a wonderful afternoon. Thank you very much.